New today, the CDC is sharing a stunning admission that it failed to meet the moment of crisis as the COVID pandemic spread throughout the nation. The federal agency promising a major overhaul after the internally initiated investigation discovered a repeatedly botched response to COVID-19.
The nation's top health agency admitting failures and promising change after a scathing internally initiated review revealed the CDC mishandled the coronavirus pandemic. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky saying the agency had prepared for 75 years for something like this, but that the performance did not reliably meet expectations. In a message to staff reviewed by ABC News, Walensky mincing no words, saying, "To be frank, we are responsible for some pretty dramatic, pretty public mistakes, from testing to data to communications. As an agency, even with all the terrific work we do, we still suffer the consequences from these mistakes." Walensky herself called for that review, which found the CDC's recommendations throughout the crisis, from masking to vaccines, confusing and overwhelming. The agency now making staffing moves, taking steps to speed up data releases, creating a more user-friendly website, and sharing information faster and in plain language, easy to understand.
On page 115 of his excellent and regrettably prescient 1984 book, The Tyranny of the Status Quo, and it makes it even more fitting that the book was published in the year 1984, the economist, social philosopher, and Nobel laureate Milton Friedman famously wrote, "There is nothing more permanent than a temporary government program." And out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of now well-entrenched bureaucracies that combine to form the evil, slimy Voltron of the U.S. federal government tentacle monster, most or all of them originated as what were supposed to be temporary measures to solve some specific problem. And then they were supposed to go away. But we know how this works. The next temporary central government program that voluntarily shuts itself down after its original objective has been achieved will be the first one. Mr. Friedman wasn't just whistling Dixie after all. And speaking of Dixie, that brings us neatly along to the Orwellian Social Engineering Bureau and Democrat Party Propaganda Clearinghouse that we now know as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC to its friends. What was the CDC supposed to be when it first originated in 1946? Well, it was called the Communicable Disease Center back then, and already we can see the first indications of mission creep just in the name they chose for the thing. And it was the successor organization of a program called Malaria Control in War Areas, the original purpose of which was, we are fighting a world war against Germany and Japan. Much of our war industries and many of our important military installations are located in the Deep South. But malaria still remains an endemic disease in that region of the country, and malaria outbreaks are not conducive to the successful conclusion of our war effort. So let's set up a program under the auspices of the War Department, using the knowledge we gained when we successfully stamped out malaria in Panama before we built the canal, and we will successfully stamp out malaria in the American South, with a view to safeguarding our war industries and our military operations. And that was 79 years ago. It's Friday, the 5th of September. This is Curmudgeon's Corner. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where 50 years ago I organized a committee to clean out the soot in the chimneys, and now they are telling me what kind of clothes I am allowed to wear. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to Curmudgeon's Corner. Let's talk about when Democrats give the game away just by the words they use. If, for example, you flip on the television and there's a Senate hearing in progress, and you see a Democrat senator pounding on the table in righteous outrage, trying his very best to squirt out some fake tears and screaming at the top of his lungs that people will literally die, well, that means someone is trying to downsize a federal bureaucracy or make it operate more efficiently on a smaller budget. And we saw a whole bunch of that sort of performative fake moral outrage yesterday, as Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testified before the Senate Finance Committee on the supposed crisis at the CDC. What's the nature of this crisis, you ask? Well, the root cause of the crisis is that Secretary Kennedy is not a professional public health bureaucrat. In fact, he has very deep and abiding mistrust of the public health bureaucracy. He believes, correctly, as most sane people do, that the public health bureaucracy has gotten a lot of things very badly wrong in the last several decades, or more. And so, a group of 1,000 CDC bureaucrats signed an op-ed in the New York Times last week saying they refuse to work in a department that is led by such a monstrously unqualified non-public health bureaucrat, and damn it, either Kennedy goes or we go, and we really mean it. And while a reasonable person might look at that and conclude, okay, 1,000 fewer public health idiot bureaucrats? That sounds like a very encouraging start. The Democrats and their fellow travelers in the fake news media, as you might expect, they very strongly reject that particular conclusion because people will literally die. Die, I say, if this one federal bureaucracy has 1,000 fewer bureaucrats in it. But hey, at least these people don't suffer from any delusions of unwarranted self-importance, right? And it's important to note here that while the interests of the Democrat Party and the federal bureaucratic tentacle monster are often well aligned, and they are aligned again in this particular case, they do not share a commonality of motivation. Do any of them actually care about people dying? No, of course they don't. Let's not be silly. That's just a thing you say when you are trying to create a delicious bit of viral video that you can blast out along with next week's fundraising email. For the public health bureaucrats, and public health should always be bracketed with scare quotes because they do not actually give two squirts of piss about the health of the public. They don't want to be working for a boss who engages in any sort of actual oversight of what they do. They want the new boss to be just the same as the old boss. They want the freedom to continue collecting their big lavish salaries and benefit packages for not doing any actual useful work. They want the freedom to continue being hidebound by institutional groupthink. They wish to continue living in a world where there are never any professional consequences that redound upon them when they get things wildly, spectacularly wrong. And the elected Democrats? Well, they don't care about any of that stuff, except that they instinctively and strenuously oppose any effort to downsize or streamline the federal administrative state or to make it more accountable to the U.S. taxpayer. The thing they care about, the thing that animates them and motivates them to get out of bed in the morning, is they really, really want to take a scalp from Trump's cabinet. Do they care whose scalp it is? No. They don't care one little bit, not for a single moment. And so they will continue bouncing from one cabinet secretary to another, and then to another, and then to another, until they have got a Trump cabinet secretary scalp that they can proudly wear on their ammo belt like a Mandalorian bounty hunter. It's only been 8 months since the start of the second Trump administration, and Kennedy is the third scalp they have attempted to take so far. They started with Pete Hegseth. That effort failed spectacularly. So they moved on to Pam Bondi, and that effort failed just as spectacularly. Now they are on to Bobby Kennedy, and this effort will also fail spectacularly. But they will keep on going right down the line until they have run out of cabinet secretaries. Frankly, I'm surprised they haven't gone after Linda McMahon yet, especially in light of how many leftist activist grifters there are whose livelihoods depend on a constant inflow of dirty money from the federal education department. So, if you want this reporter's prediction, after the Kennedy scalp-taking operation crashes and burns, as it is sure to do, Linda McMahon is probably who they will turn to next. Because the politics of personal destruction are the only kind of politics these people know. If we can't destroy Trump directly, then the next best thing is to destroy the people around Trump. But I want to get back to the CDC, because the history of the CDC is a great object lesson, perhaps the prototypical object lesson, in the way that federal bureaucratic mission creep turns things over time from a good and useful idea that is supposed to be temporary into an evil, odious, Orwellian tool of political activism and brute force social engineering that is wielded against the people of the country as a weapon. So where did we leave off? That's right, 1946. The war is over. We have defeated our enemies. The malaria control program has made a lot of progress, but you know what? We have not quite finished the work of eradicating malaria entirely. So how about let's just re-enshrine this military program into the civilian central government. We will rename it the Communicable Disease Center. You'll notice the word malaria doesn't appear anywhere in the name, but don't worry, guys. It's still a totally temporary thing. It is only about finishing the work of eradicating malaria in the southern states. And once that job is complete, we will shut the thing down and go home, we promise. Oh, but wait. We can't do that. People might literally die if we do that. What if there is a new outbreak of bubonic plague? So we better keep this thing going. In 1947, the Public Health Service Plague Laboratory is rolled into the CDC, which now has an epidemiology division. Then 1949 rolls around. We're in the Cold War now, guys. The damn Ruskies might release some evil bioweapon and we'll have no idea how to fight it. So the only thing to do is expand the operations of the CDC and massively increase its budget, or else people might literally die. Then 1951 rolls around, and you know what, guys? Polio still exists. So we better roll that into the purview of the CDC, which, of course, will require a massive expansion and a much bigger budget. Then 1957 and 1958 roll around. We better roll flu vaccines, cholera, and smallpox into the operations of the CDC. Then 1964 rolls around, and you know what? Smoking cigarettes is bad, so we better have the CDC become a full-on social engineering bureau that tells people how they ought to behave in their private lives on their own time. Then 1970 rolls around, and you know what, guys? We're doing so many things now, some of which are totally outside the purview of communicable disease, that we better change the name to Center for Disease Control. Then 1973 rolls around. We better have the CDC take over the authority for regulating occupational safety, because of course we should. Does that have anything to do with controlling disease? No, but that doesn't matter. Have you seen how big our budget is and how many employees we have got now? Then the 1980s and the 1990s and the 2000s roll around. CDC keeps hoovering up different parts of the federal government and inventing brand new things for itself to do, all of which, obviously, require massive institutional expansions and bigger and bigger and bigger budgets. And then we get to 2020, and the China virus hits. An actual public health crisis. And what did we get from the CDC? Did we get honest, dispassionate, scientifically grounded information? Nope. We got a social engineering campaign that comported perfectly in all respects right down the line with the political objectives of the Democrat Party and the big public employee unions. We got cartoons. They did literally all of their messaging in freaking cartoons, explaining that if you strap a stupid piece of cloth over your face, it will magically stop microscopic virus particles. We got other cartoons saying if you're 5 feet away from another person, you will probably die, but if you're 6 feet away, you'll be totally fine. We got the CDC going right along with Joe Biden's effort to throw 85 million people off their jobs for declining to get inoculated against a virus for which many or most of us already had acquired immunity. It's so sciencey. I can't even stand how sciencey this is. We got public schools shut down for over a year when the virus never posed any serious risk of harm to children. And only 3 years later did we get an open admission from our distinguished public health authorities that 94% of the people they gleefully chalked up as China virus deaths had underlying health conditions and comorbidities. In other words, they lied. They lied on purpose. They lied the entire time. They lied for reasons that had nothing whatever to do with safeguarding the health of the public, and everything to do with flexing their own institutional political power. And were they ever asked any difficult questions by the people we used to call journalists? Of course they weren't. Our fake news performance artists simply grinned and nodded until the monologue was over. So the next time you hear about a temporary government project that's just supposed to do one thing and then go away, I encourage you to think long and hard about the history of the agency that now carries the increasingly Soviet-style moniker of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'm done. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Do not comply. Do not meekly submit yourself to tyrants. And get off my lawn.